Good afternoon to you. Mark Stout of HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, the 11th of April, 2022, and you have tuned into our off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. As the headline there says, well, let's take me away so you can see it better. Major spring storm. We're going to talk about that. Looking ahead to the hurricane season, I just returned late last night from South Padre Island and the National Tropical Weather Conference. An amazing few days down there visiting with old colleagues. Old, meaning we've been a long time working together, colleagues. Some of them are old. We're all getting older, yes, but it was great to be back together after a 3-year hiatus because of the pandemic. Now finally being able to meet in person, and it is very important. Not everything can be accomplished over Zoom. I hope people have learned that you still need these interactions. You share ideas. You brew up new ideas. Innovation really helps to get fostered when you can get people together and meet face-to-face. So it's very good to do that. And I will talk about over subsequent updates what we learned. I'll start with a little bit today, but as you can see at the top there, the tabs are full. A lot of stuff to go over today, so let's get started with it, shall we? First of all, over in the Western Pacific, a couple of areas near the Philippines. One is a depression over the Philippines, and then there's a typhoon out that way. Heavy rainfall is the big threat, of course, from our tropical depression, and then there is a typhoon to the east of that. That typhoon, we'll just click on it and show you this from the tracker here from the University of Wisconsin site. That will be moving, staying away from and moving away from the Philippines, so no worries if you have interests out here. We have interests there. Our friend and colleague Brent Lynn is in the Philippines. He said that depression in Legazpi City caused the power to go out this morning. He was eating breakfast by candlelight. So it's always hurricane season somewhere, and in the Westpac, it's kind of busy today. All right, let's close that tab. I'll show you a real quick satellite animation. The remnants of that depression still sitting over here in the central Philippines with heavy rainfall, which is a hazard. It is. You got to remember, it doesn't all have to be 190 knots and 890 millibars of pressure to become a problem. It's a problem when it's dumping heavy rain over any place where we live and in the natural environment. Rainfall is a hazard. There's the typhoon to the east, and again, that is going to curve out into the westerlies eventually and not be a problem directly to any land areas. But interesting to see the Western Pacific starting to come to life a little bit. Okie dokes. So this was introduced as of the 7th of April. We were all there for it when Dr. Klotzbach released the first official numbers for the upcoming hurricane season. You already know this, I'm sure. 19 named storms, that is up there. That is a bold forecast. 9 of those named storms, 9 of them would become hurricanes, according to this prediction, with 4 of those 9 hurricanes becoming Category 3 or higher. The ACE that he is looking at, the accumulated cyclone energy of 160, the average is 123. So all of these numbers are above the long-term average. It is predicted to be a very busy season once again. And part of the reason behind that, no El Nino, almost a certainty now that we're not going to have an El Nino this year. And the presumed, if that's a word, resumption of a warm tropical Atlantic as we get into the hurricane season. The subtropics in the western parts of the basin, I'll show you in a moment, are already warmer than average. The deep tropics, the main development region, has cooled off due to some pretty strong trade winds in recent weeks, but the presumption here is that that will warm up again. The West African monsoon will become more active. That is an anomalous wind shift off the coast of Africa, extending out into the Atlantic enough so that it would warm up the deep tropics and give us a very busy hurricane season. You can read all about it at this link here. I will put that link in the description of the video if you haven't read it yet. And there is a method to all of this. There really is. There are over, by the way, he and I did a podcast together for our Patreon crowd. It's on, if you haven't seen it, and you're on Patreon with us, check it out. I did a sit-down with Dr. Klotzbach while at the National Tropical Weather Conference for about an hour. And we didn't talk about seasonal forecasting per se. It was more of, getting to know Dr. Klotzbach. How did he get to go from Plymouth, Massachusetts to Colorado, and some stuff about Bill Gray. It's kind of a more getting to know Dr. Klotzbach thing than, hey, what's the forecast all about? Because you can read the forecast yourself. So why sit down and have him talk about it when you can read it? I wanted to discuss, what makes Phil tick kind of thing. So if you're on Patreon, be sure to check out that podcast. But the ins and outs of it, basically, the lack of El Nino, the warmer Atlantic, again, the assumption is it's going to warm back up as we get into the hurricane season ahead, and we should have a pretty busy season. But there's about 30 different organizations now that do seasonal prediction. That's a lot. And none of them are coming up with like a totally new and revolutionary predictor that no one's ever saw or thought of before. It's all kind of the same thing, which is kind of weird. Like, why would 30 different organizations basically say the same thing? Make the judgment for yourself. Colorado State, going back to the late Dr. Bill Gray, has been doing this a long time, and they are making headway at identifying the major pieces to understand seasonal predictability for tropical cyclones. So here's part of it. There's the La Nina. That's in place, and put a big check mark there. Definitely warmer in the western Atlantic, the subtropics especially. Cooled off here in the main development region. But I found it interesting, I will say this, that one of the predictors is the warmth off of the Iberian Peninsula relative to average. That can have a big role in the upcoming hurricane season. And as you can see, it is slightly warmer than average up there. It's not screaming at the top of the charts kind of thing. This does not suggest a really hyperactive 2020 or 2005 type season, but I think the dice are going to be loaded in the favor of another busy season, and we all need to be ready for that, whatever happens, because, the old saying, it only takes one, and ladies and gentlemen, that could just be a tropical depression. It does not have to be a Michael or an Ida or a Harvey or a Camille or an Andrew. You have to understand that. Rain, wind, storm surge, those are all hazards, and they can affect you wherever you are. So just keep that in mind as we go forward, all right? Here's the other part of the puzzle, the subsurface here with the La Nina. And again, this is a really telling feature. Look at the cold subsurface waters expand after an attempt earlier in the winter there. It looked like El Nino was going to try to come in, but then the cold water was like, nope. The subsurface cold water started to make its presence known. There is, in recent frames here, a resurgence of this deep West Pacific warm pool, but I think that the pattern is such that this cold subsurface pattern will stay in its dominance, leading us into the hurricane season, delivering another La Nina for the peak of the season, and most of the modeling is suggesting that. I show this one often from INSEP, the CFS V2. There are a lot of statistical and dynamical models and everything in between, but this one is generally holding on that we will be in La Nina territory through the rest of the year and probably getting into early 2023. Already looking out that far. So far, so good on the consistency of the patterns. There doesn't seem to be anything that's going to throw a big monkey wrench into everything that we didn't see coming. It looks like the busy hurricane season is going to at least be set up to take place. Whether or not it actually happens, we have to wait and see. There are no guarantees. It's all probabilities. Remember that too. All right. So actual sea surface temperatures, for what it's worth, again, I was over here in South Padre Island and near Port Isabel in that vicinity. A great location of the country. A lot of people go there for spring break. And then just south of there is Boca Chica. And I will say it was quite an honor to be able to go out there and have a private tour of SpaceX, the conference organizers and the folks that in Brownsville with the Visit Brownsville, like the Chamber of Commerce, you know what I mean? The PR people behind tourism and industry for Brownsville. We got a private tour of the Port of Brownsville and SpaceX. Literally got to go, and you can ride right down that country road, or county road, and be right next to the launch pad. But you can't walk over there unless you have an escort, and we had a police escort, a couple of engineers that showed us around. It blew my mind. It blew all of our minds. I don't want to brag or anything, but I mean, wow, that was a real treat. But what was interesting, and it's relevant to here, I don't want to give you the FOMO, the fear of missing out, but it was amazing. But what was also amazing, we got there Wednesday, it was like 97 degrees or something like that in Brownsville, upper 90s, close to 100 degrees, and then the wind shifted to being from offshore to onshore, and that cool Gulf down there, to my point here, still a little chilly, and it turned kind of cool down there, in my opinion. It was in the 60s and 70s, which is not bad, but these water temperatures are still just a little bit chilly. They are warming up elsewhere, though, as you would expect. The big microwave in the sky, as the former director of the National Hurricane Center, Bill Reed, calls it. The sun keeps doing its thing, adding the energy into the oceans, and it stores that energy, and the oceans warm up. Kind of neat, isn't it? I think it is, and at least it gives us nice beach days. But the northern Gulf Coast, the shelf water areas, those are still chilly, but they will rapidly start to warm here in the coming weeks as we get into May, which is not that far off, and then we're going to have to start watching. Do we get something that tries to develop over here early before the season begins? We have, had 7 years in a row where we've had pre-June development. Will that continue this year? We shall see. Meanwhile, off the mid-Atlantic and northeast, the gradient, the difference in temperature over distance in this situation, is lessening a little bit. It's not quite as thick with the isotherms in here. Why? Because the water temperatures are generally warming up uniformly, and so you don't have the big contrast where it's really cold up here and really warm down here. The gradient's still there. You can clearly see all these lines packed together, but they're not quite as dense because we're warming things up. We're getting there. Still need a wetsuit to get out there, that's for darn sure. But going back to the anomalies map real fast here, there it is. Look at this. This still just boggles my mind how warm it is in the Gulf Stream right off the East Coast, and how warm the temperatures are relative to average in and around the Florida Peninsula and through the Sargasso Sea surrounding Bermuda. Very, very warm in this area, and we'll see if the Canary Current over here drives some warmer water south off of Iberia, and then we get the switch of the monsoon out here. The West African monsoon causes an anomalous westerly wind towards August, warming up the main development region. That could drive a very, very busy season, and then these warm anomalies to the west, it could be a big season for land once again, and that's where it really matters, right? Generally. We still have the open ocean with maritime interest, of course, but it's an interesting season coming up for sure. Now, back to the Tropical Weather Conference. I want to just kind of brag on it again. Such a well-done conference. That little graphic there, that's a huge LED wall. If I had that behind me in my office, this whole video thing would take on a brand new dimension. Believe me, I could take it up a notch. That's a few grand, though. That's a little pricey there. But it was like 10 feet tall and like 20 feet wide. Full LED projection system so we could stand in front of it and do our updates. The fine sponsors there from USAA, Walmart, the Weather Company, Black Magic, which does like switching. Some of you gamers out there might know Black Magic. And, of course, the Weather Boy. They flew in, the gentleman that runs Weather Boy flew in some students from Texas A&M and Purdue. I don't remember where the third person was from. My apologies. But it was just a great time to get back together, share what we've done the last few years, learn a few things. You got to learn some stuff. It's not all just handshakes and, hey, how you been? You want to come away learning something that you didn't know beforehand, or what we can emphasize going forward that can help people be ready for the upcoming hurricane season. And one of those is this. We do a lot in the scientific community on the social side, which is a lot about what we do here at HurricaneTrack. We do have applied science, but a lot of this is social science, getting you ready, the public, for the impacts. That's really important. So I want to emphasize this graph here, because these pie charts, infographic, because we get you through the storms pretty well now. Between what I do and my team, we're a tiny, tiny part of it. The biggest part is the National Hurricane Center and the United States National Hurricane Program. Through the media, through the weather forecast offices, and then individual entities like myself, larger entities like the Weather Channel, or your local TV meteorologist and what they do on social media. The social science part keeps you generally from dying in the hurricanes now. After Katrina, we've done a lot. After Sandy, we have done a lot, especially. Okay, storm surge is killing very few people now. through evacuation. That's huge. Where we are losing people the most now is after the storm. This term, indirect fatalities, bothers me. I mean, I realize the storm itself didn't do it. The storm surge, if you survived that, okay, it didn't kill you. The wind didn't knock a tree over and then that killed you, or you got a 2x4 driven through your heart. It sounds terrible, but yes, that's what the wind could do. Or you didn't drown in freshwater flooding. Those are direct fatalities. Indirect, that's just a weird, like if the hurricane hadn't happened, you wouldn't have had the fatalities. So I understand social science has to dissect it, and you have direct and indirect, but you take the storm out of the equation completely, and those people didn't perish in the first place. So what do we got to do? We got to really emphasize the aftermath part. We're doing a great job of keeping you safe through the storm, but like Ken Graham, that's the director, there's his name right there, of the National Hurricane Center. He's our current director, and he is as charismatic and just to the point as I have seen in a long time. Bill Reed was fantastic. Max Mayfield, probably the best of my generation, in my opinion. Neil Frank, going back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Come on, he's the godfather of it all. Almost literally, just an amazing individual in and of himself. But Ken Graham, in the age of social media and all the noise that's out there and all the products that are available, embracing this notion that we have to zero in on where are we still losing people, what's happening. They've done great with watches and warnings and keeping people from drowning from surge. That's awesome. But we're losing people in the aftermath. So I'm going to focus on that more and more and more. Okay, all right, let's get you through the storm, but then remember the aftermath. Carbon monoxide, heart attacks. That is a very, very big part of this. And look at the graph there. I think I can zoom in on this. Yes. So the deaths, and I'm going to get this graphic from Ken. I'm going to get him to send it to me, and we'll actually tweet it out. But a very, very important graphic as to what is happening. And this is the one over here. I'll take me away so you can see where it divides it up. That heart attack, like 31%, I think is what it says. There's the other categories that I have to specify. What does that mean? And then you have evacuation, vehicular incidences. Yes, evacuation kills people. Think of Rita. It is difficult to move people. It is. It's dangerous, especially people with special needs that normally are in a set position somewhere. Oxygen, other necessities where they are hooked up to life-saving machines, and you got to move them now potentially hundreds of miles. Stuff can go wrong. So evacuation can cause death. Power problems. I love this infographic, this wheel here. And again, I'm going to get the original graphic from Ken Graham and share it on Twitter just as soon as I can. I took this picture just to kind of reiterate this point, or introduce you to the point, really, and then I'm going to reiterate it a lot going forward. We're doing great to get you through the storm. We got to get you through the aftermath. All right? Now let's move on to lower 48 weather. It is April 11th. And you're almost like, what is it? Is it February or April? Wow! That is a heck of a map. Literally east of the Mississippi. There's some little space there just west of it that's blank. But let's just pretend that this goes all the way to the Mississippi, which is basically right through here, right? East of there, 2 thumbs up. West of there, 2 thumbs down. Like bad travel weather, fire weather, blizzard, high wind warnings, like severe weather's coming up. I mean, holy mackerel. If I wasn't going to Orlando day after tomorrow to speak at the National Hurricane Conference, I'm doing a presentation there, and it's important. I really do need to be there. That's emergency managers, decision makers, law enforcement, whereas the National Tropical Weather Conference is primarily university, research, and TV meteorologists, broadcast. I mean, anybody can go to it, but the National Hurricane Conference is really geared towards emergency managers and law enforcement and decision makers. And if I wasn't going to that, I would probably be in the Dakotas today, because just look at that. That's amazing. So what's happening? Well, major mid-latitude storm, big old cyclone, as we call it. That's what it is going to take shape. It's going to look just like this. Big old low is going to sit up here somewhere, roughly, and all kinds of mayhem is going to ensue, already ensuing present progressive, right? It's happening now. I think that's what it is. And it's going to happen out into the future the next day or so. A major, major storm west of the Mississippi taking shape. You can see that outlined here on the Storm Prediction Center site for severe weather. The enhanced risk today primarily focused on Arkansas with a 10% tornado, 15 for wind and hail. Pretty significant in there as well. Some big hailstorms possible with some of those supercells. That's today. Tomorrow, right up the eastern side of the main part of the Tornado Alley zone. There's your tornado probabilities, wind and hail. Lots of chasers are going to be out there, probably. High gas prices notwithstanding. So pay attention. This is it. This is a typical springtime severe storm setup. Major snows and cold and nastiness up here. And then to the south and east in the warm sector where the shear and the instability resides. Yes, a big severe weather outbreak tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, that moves east, right into the heart of the Mississippi Valley there. So yes, this will translate to east of the Mississippi eventually. So you folks be ready for that going forward. And then let's just look out into time, days 4 through 8. Luckily, the probability gets to be a little bit too low, but this will increase as we get out into time. Let me show what it looks like real quick at the 500 millibar level. This is this morning. This goes out through today, tonight, the next few days. Just look at that energy right there. That's it. That's the upper level energy that's spawning all this at the surface. You've got warm, moist air coming in, and that provides the energy, the moisture, and some of the instability, and this will set it all off. A huge plethora of energy there translating across the lower 48. Pretty impressive here over the next several days, and not in a good way. That is, look at those upper level winds right there. I'm telling you, you folks out there, you know it in Tornado Alley. I know you're aware. It's like telling people in Louisiana, you still have to remind them. They know hurricanes are coming, but this is it. You got to pay attention. This could be a very active several days, sliding into the areas of the Mississippi Valley from there. All right, so just be aware. Everything else going on in the world, keep in touch with all of your weather sources that you rely on, and all of us will help you get through it. Now, I want to show you something here that is really, really remarkable as we get ready to exit. One of our supporters on the back end does a lot of our graphics, terrific stuff. His name is Tim Melman. He's getting ready to graduate high school, lives in the suburbs of Chicago roughly. You can see his little bio over there. I don't know where he's going to go to school yet. Let's see, I don't know what OPRF 22 means. Graphic designer, and he does stuff for us. I'm just trying to read. I hadn't talked to him personally in a while to see where he's going to go to school, but for college. But he's college bound, and when he gets there, depending on what he does, he's going to be amazing. What has he done? He has created a better way to categorize hurricanes using central pressure instead of wind speed. I know this will become controversial immediately, but this visual adaptation of this paper that Dr. Klotzbach et al., that's the team that worked on it, did, is represented in this paper, an infographic that Tim did, Tim Melman. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of a sample of it here. This is the cover, so to speak, and this is a little bit of an idea of it. I will post a link to this as well soon. I just want to introduce it to you. Let's just zoom in on it. I'll show you if it'll let me. No, Twitter doesn't let me. That's a bummer. Let's see if it'll open image in new tab. There we go. That works. So the current system, it's all outlined. The proposed system based on pressure and then how to categorize stuff. And it goes on and on and on, several pages. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, when I put this out for you and you can see it, let's get this back down to size there. I just want to introduce it to you because this is neat. It is sort of a change in where we have been from the Saffir-Simpson hurricane damage potential scale, which was based on wind, to looking at pressure as a better mechanism for categorizing hurricanes. And I don't want to give away too much, but think about it. And I learned a lot of this from Dr. Klotzbach in my interview with him. Pressure is a more stable way to measure a hurricane's intensity, whereas wind is very difficult. It's transient. Your storms rise and fall, the convection. the ability of instruments to fail. How many times have we seen, very questionable wind data coming in, even from our stuff? It's hard to do. Believe me, I drive my team, to try to get these anemometers out there. Even some of the $1 million funded universities have failures. They're stick nets from Texas Tech or the Florida Coastal Monitoring Program. Their towers fell over. One of them did during Hurricane Michael there at the Tyndall Air Force Base area. Wind is hard to measure. The hurricane is trying to destroy everything it can. That's its goal in life, so to speak. It's just the side effects of it. It's not a living creature, as you know. But, the bottom line, though, pressure, using a pressure sensor from a simple Kestrel like this, like we use, these little guys, to the instruments very similar to this that Josh Morgerman places out, and the other chasers that are out there. Many of them do it to weather forecast offices, which are randomly scattered around the country, to Weatherflow, a very well-renowned company. They have a lot of sensors. This is a lot easier, and these are about $130 a pop. A good anemometer like what we use are $1,600 plus, and they're very difficult to cite. So I'm going to put a link to this paper. I'll tweet it soon, probably this week, and I just wanted to introduce it to you here. Maybe a little bit of a change. It's not up to us. We're not going to have a say-so in changing the way hurricanes are categorized, but it is a proposal based on Dr. Klotzbach, his recent published paper, that using pressure versus wind is a better way to categorize hurricanes. So Tim Melman, great job there. He was in Wilmington recently when I was on vacation, and I didn't get to meet him in person. It was like, you got to be kidding me. He was right here, and I was out of town on vacation with the family, which is a good thing. You got to be with the family when you travel as much as I do. But at least he got to see the port city of Wilmington with his family. So anyway, lots of stuff happening. The big winter storm, you guys be safe out. That's winter storm. It's got winter components. A spring storm. Be safe out there if you're in it, if it's affecting you, especially our truckers and long-haul travel people. You're at the mercy of this weather, so be real careful out there. Hurricane season fast approaching. We know that. We'll do what we can to get you ready. We got a lot of stuff planned. Innovative. Yep, you bet. More, bigger, better. Legendary coverage we're going to provide you. That's going to be our tagline this year. Legendary coverage, because it is. What we've done these last 20-plus years has only gotten better and more innovative, immersing you in the action with data to back it up, not just the hype and the sensationalism and the eye candy of what happens, but the science behind it, trying to bring all of that to you. And we're going to continue to do that as we get into the 2022 hurricane season, which, as we talked about, looks like it could be another busy one. All right, that's it from me for this week. We will be tweeting out, and on Facebook, CJ, he'll be handling that, covering the major spring storm, so be sure to check into that. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course we are supported through Patreon. Get the app, download it, Patreon, search for HurricaneTrack. You won't be disappointed. Support what we do from crowdfunding and help us to continue to grow. All right, I'm off to Orlando later this week for the National Hurricane Conference, and then we will reconvene here a week from today. Sound good? Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you in about a week.